The rumble of hundreds of motorcycles echoed through the small town as they converged on Daisy's diner. Sarah watched from across the street, her hands shaking as the leather-clad army assembled in defense of a man she'd only met once. She never imagined standing up for what was right would lead to this moment, a moment that would change everything. Hi everyone, welcome to In the Heartlight. Let's get started. Sarah Miller wiped down the counter at Daisy's diner for the third time that morning. The small-town establishment had been a fixture in Riverbrook for over 40 years, and for the past 6 of those, it had been Sarah's workplace and second home. At 32, Sarah's life wasn't exactly where she'd imagined it would be. A single mother to 16-year-old Emma, she worked 6 days a week at the diner and picked up weekend shifts at the local grocery store to make ends meet. This month had been particularly tough after her 20-year-old Toyota needed a new transmission, an expense that had nearly emptied her modest savings. "Order up for table 5, Sarah," called Ron, the short-order cook who'd been at Daisy's even longer than she had. Sarah nodded, expertly balancing 3 plates along her arm as she had thousands of times before. Her customers at table 5, a family of locals, smiled warmly as she approached. "Here we go, folks. Denver omelet for you, sir. Blueberry pancakes for the young man, and Sarah's special for the lady," she announced, setting each plate down with practiced precision. "Thanks, Sarah. Don't know how you remember everyone's usual," the man said appreciatively. Sarah smiled. 6 years of practice, Mr. Rat Henderson. Plus, some habits stick with you. Back when I was a cook for the Army, I had to remember the preferences of nearly 200 soldiers. Most customers didn't know about Sarah's 4 years of military service. She didn't advertise it, but she didn't hide it either. The discipline and attention to detail she'd learned while feeding troops had served her well in civilian life, even if her dreams of opening her own restaurant remained distant. As she refilled coffee mugs around the diner, Sarah exchanged friendly words with each customer. Everyone in Riverbrook knew her by name, and she knew their stories too, their joys, struggles, and favorite breakfast orders. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was honest work that allowed her to provide for Emma, and there was value in that. The bell above the door jingled, and Sarah looked up to see a familiar figure enter. Mike Thornton, old Mike to the locals, made his way slowly to his usual corner booth. At 72, Mike moved with the deliberate care of someone managing chronic pain, but he never complained. His weathered leather vest bore patches from his Vietnam service and his motorcycle club, the Defenders, a group mostly comprising veterans from various eras. Sarah grabbed a mug and the coffee pot, heading to his table before he'd even settled in. "Morning, Mike. The usual today?" Mike's weathered face crinkled into a smile. "You know it, Sarah. How's that daughter of yours doing with those college applications?" "She's working on them, still hoping for that scholarship." Sarah poured his coffee with the precision of someone who'd performed this exact ritual hundreds of times. "Your buddies joining you today?" Mike shook his head. "Not today. They're preparing for the charity ride next weekend. Just me enjoying some peace and quiet before a busy day." The door chimed again, and Sarah glanced over to see an unfamiliar group enter. A well-dressed woman in her 40s, accompanied by a man in a golf shirt and 2 teenagers who were engrossed in their phones. The woman surveyed the diner with a critical eye, her designer handbag hanging from the crook of her arm. "Somewhere without the smell of grease would have been better, Richard," the woman said loudly enough for half the diner to hear. Sarah gave Mike a small smile. "I'll be back with your breakfast in a few," she said before heading to greet the new customers. "Welcome to Daisy's," Sarah said warmly. "Table for 4? The woman, whom Sarah would later come to think of simply as Karen, looked around disdainfully. "I suppose, somewhere away from." Her eyes flicked toward Mike. "The riffraff would be preferred." Sarah maintained her professional smile, though it cooled several degrees. "Right this way, please," she said, leading them to a table on the opposite side of the diner. As she handed them menus, she couldn't help but notice the woman's continued glances toward Mike's corner. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" Sarah asked, pen poised over her order pad. The woman leaned forward. "Actually, yes. Could you ask that?" She gestured toward Mike. "Biker to move? We're here for a family breakfast and I don't feel comfortable with my children around his type." Sarah blinked, momentarily stunned by the request. "His type? You know exactly what I mean," the woman said with a dismissive wave. "Bikers are dangerous, and he looks unsavory. Surely you have some back room where he could sit?" Sarah took a measured breath. 6 years of customer service had taught her how to handle difficult situations with grace, but this request crossed a line. "Ma'am, that gentleman is Mike Thornton. He's a regular customer and a respected member of our community," Sarah explained calmly. "He's sitting in his usual spot, and I'm afraid I can't ask him to move." The woman's perfectly made-up face hardened. "I see. So you prioritize some old biker over a family paying good money to eat here?" "We welcome all customers equally at Daisy's," Sarah replied. "Now, may I take your order, or would you prefer a few more minutes with the menu?" The woman, who would later identify herself as Patricia Worthington, wasn't ready to let it go. She tapped her manicured nails on the table impatiently. "Do you know who I am? I'm Patricia Worthington of Worthington Realty. My agency handles half the property transactions in this county. I don't think your manager would appreciate you speaking to me this way." From across the diner, Mike sipped his coffee quietly, obviously aware of the conversation, but maintaining his dignity by not engaging. A few other regulars had begun to notice the exchange, their conversations quieting as they tuned in. Sarah remained professional. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Worthington, but our policy is first come, first served. Mr. Hack Thornton was here before you. Now, what can I get for you this morning?" Patricia's husband looked uncomfortable. "Honey, maybe we should just order." "No, Richard," Patricia snapped. "I want to speak to the manager. Now." Sarah nodded. "I'll get Walter for you." As Sarah walked away, she noticed 17-year-old Zach Thompson at a nearby table holding up his phone, discreetly recording the interaction. She made her way to the kitchen, where Walter Davis, the diner's manager of 15 years, was reviewing inventory. "Walter, we have a situation," Sarah explained quietly, describing Patricia's demands. Walter, a nervous man whose primary concern was avoiding conflict, sighed deeply. "This woman, she looks wealthy, driving a white Lexus SUV?" Sarah nodded. "That's Patricia Worthington. Her real estate company brings a lot of business to town," Walter said, removing his apron. "I'll handle it." They returned to find Patricia standing by Mike's table, speaking loudly. "I don't think it's appropriate for someone like you to be sitting in the main dining area," she was saying. "It's making my children uncomfortable." Mike looked up calmly. "I'm just having my breakfast, ma'am. Same as I do every Tuesday." Patricia scoffed. "Well, your appearance is disturbing. Couldn't you at least remove that vest with all those threatening patches?" Several customers were now openly watching. One elderly woman at the counter shook her head in disapproval. At Patricia, not Mike. "Mrs. Worthington," Walter interrupted with a placating smile, "I understand there's some concern. How can I help make your dining experience better today?" Patricia turned, triumph flashing across her face. "Finally, someone with authority. I was explaining to this gentleman that his appearance is disturbing to my family. We'd appreciate if he could be moved to another section." Walter fidgeted. "Well, we do want all our customers to be comfortable." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Walter, Mike sits in that booth 3 times a week. He's been coming here for years." Patricia cut in. "I'm sure your regular wouldn't mind accommodating a family just this once." Mike began to gather his things. "It's all right. I don't want any trouble." "No," Sarah said firmly, surprising even herself with her tone. "Mike, please stay where you are. You've done nothing wrong." She turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Worthington, That man you're so concerned about is a Vietnam veteran who served 2 tours protecting the freedoms you're enjoying right now. He's the president of a motorcycle club that raises thousands of dollars every year for children's hospitals and veteran services. Patricia's eyes narrowed. I don't care if he's the Pope. His type doesn't belong near my children. His type? Sarah repeated, her military bearing becoming more evident as she straightened her posture. You mean decorated veterans? Community volunteers? Which type exactly concerns you? The diner had fallen completely silent. Even Patricia's teenagers had looked up from their phones, sensing the tension. Walter stepped between them. Now, Sarah, let's remain professional. Mrs. Worthington is a valued customer. Mike is a valued customer too, Sarah countered. Patricia suddenly reached for her water glass and knocked it over, sending water spilling across the table toward Mike. It wasn't entirely clear if it was deliberate, but the timing was suspicious. Oh, how clumsy of me, Patricia said with artificial concern. Sarah grabbed napkins and rushed to help Mike, whose leather vest had caught some of the splash. This vest survived Vietnam, Mike said quietly to Sarah. A little water won't hurt it. As Sarah helped mop up the spill, Patricia addressed Walter directly. I'd like a new table, away from this commotion, and our meal comped for the inconvenience, she demanded. And I think that waitress needs to apologize for her attitude. Walter wrung his hands. Of course, Mrs. Worthington. Sarah, please show them to a new table and take their order. Their breakfast will be on the house today. Sarah stood up straight, napkin still in hand. I'm sorry, Walter, but I won't be serving this table unless Mrs. Worthington apologizes to Mike. Patricia gasped. Apologize? To him? For what? For disrespecting a customer and a veteran who has done nothing to warrant your treatment, Sarah replied evenly. Walter's face reddened. Sarah, that's enough. Do your job or what? Sarah asked. Or you can turn in your apron, Walter finished, voice strained but firm. The diner was so quiet you could hear the sizzle of bacon on the grill in the kitchen. Sarah looked at Walter, then at Mike, then at Patricia's smug expression. With careful deliberation, she untied her apron. I'm sorry it had to end this way, Walter, she said, placing the apron on the counter. I've enjoyed working here. Walter hadn't expected this. Sarah, don't be hasty. I served my country by feeding soldiers who put their lives on the line, Sarah said, her voice steady but emotional. I won't dishonor that service by disrespecting a veteran to please someone who hasn't shown basic human decency. She turned to Mike. Let me help you clean up before I go. As Sarah helped Mike dry his table and refill his coffee one last time, Patricia watched with a satisfied smirk. You'll regret this, Patricia called after Sarah as she headed for the door. I have influence in this town. Sarah paused at the door, considering a retort, but simply smiled instead. Enjoy your breakfast, Mrs. Worthington. Outside, Sarah leaned against the wall of the diner, suddenly overwhelmed by what had just happened. 6 years of steady employment, gone. The rent was due next week. Emma's college application fees were coming up. What had she done? As these thoughts raced through her mind, the door opened and Mike stepped out. Sarah, he said gently, that was a mighty thing you did in there. Sarah tried to smile. Not sure it was smart, but it felt right. Mike nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes right and smart don't travel together. He paused. What's your plan now? Sarah sighed. Update my resume, I guess. Hope the grocery store has full-time openings. Mike pulled out a small notebook and pen. Write down your address and phone number for me. Mike, I appreciate it, but I can't take charity. Mike shook his head. Not charity. The defenders have connections all over town. We might know someone hiring. Sarah hesitated, then wrote down her information. As she handed back the notebook, Mike clasped her hand for a moment. What you did in there, standing up for a stranger when it cost you something real, that matters. That's the kind of thing that doesn't go unnoticed. With a final nod, Mike walked slowly to his motorcycle, started it up with practiced ease despite his age, and rode away. Sarah watched him go, then turned toward home, wondering how she would tell Emma about what had happened. 3 hours later, Sarah sat at her kitchen table surrounded by job listings and a half-completed application for unemployment benefits. Emma wasn't home from school yet, which was a small blessing. It gave Sarah time to process and plan before breaking the news. The distant sound of a motorcycle caught her attention. Then another and another. Curious, Sarah walked to her front window. What she saw made her breath catch. A line of motorcycles stretched down her street as far as she could see, riders in leather vests pulling up one after another. Leading them was Mike, his gray hair visible as he removed his helmet. Beside him rode a younger man with a patch identifying him as Vice President of the Defenders. Sarah stepped onto her porch as Mike walked up her path. "Mike? What's happening?" Mike's weathered face broke into a smile. "Word travels fast in the Brotherhood. Told a few friends what happened at the diner. They told a few friends." The younger vice president stepped forward. "When Mike Thornton says someone stood up for him at their own expense, the defenders listen. But it wasn't just us." He gestured down the street. "We've got members from the Road Kings, Veterans United, even the Broken Chains from 3 counties over." Sarah looked past them at the sea of motorcycles and leather vests. "But why?" "Because what you did matters," Mike said simply. "And we protect our own." Another rider approached, a woman in her 50s with sergeant's stripes on her vest. "Heard you served too," she said to Sarah. "Army cook, right? 4th ID?" Sarah nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Mike's got a good memory," the woman replied. "I'm Rita, logistics specialist, retired 2015. You've got family here you didn't even know about." Mike cleared his throat. "Sarah, we're heading to Daisy's, all of us. Thought you might want to come along." Sarah looked down at her faded jeans and t-shirt. "I don't understand. What are you planning to do?" "Nothing illegal," Mike assured her with a twinkle in his eye. "Just a peaceful demonstration of support. Your choice if you want to join us." Rita smiled. "Though you might want to see Walter's face when 400 bikers show up ordering nothing but water." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "Let me get my jacket." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat behind Mike on his motorcycle as they led the procession down Main Street toward Daisy's diner. The rumble of hundreds of engines drew people out of shops and offices to watch the spectacle. When they arrived, the parking lot couldn't begin to hold all the motorcycles. They lined both sides of the street for 3 blocks in either direction. Riders dismounted in disciplined fashion and began filing into the diner in groups. Walter, visible through the window, looked like he might faint as leather-clad men and women filled every table, counter seat, and square foot of standing room. Mike walked in with Sarah beside him. The diner fell silent as Walter approached, his face pale. "Mike, what's going on? What is all this?" Mike spoke calmly. "Just some friends wanting lunch, Walter. 400 friends." The first group of bikers had already been seated by the overwhelmed remaining waitstaff. A waiter approached their table. "What can I get you folks?" he asked nervously. "Just water," the first biker replied. "Same," said the second. All around the diner, the scene repeated itself. Table after table of bikers ordering nothing but water. Walter wrung his hands. "Mike, please. We can't have all these people taking up tables without ordering food. We're a business." "Funny thing about that," Mike said, "we're all paying customers. We're each leaving a $20 tip for the staff. But none of us seem to be hungry enough for food until Sarah gets her job back." Patricia Worthington, who had long since finished her comped breakfast, had returned to the diner after hearing about the commotion. She stood near the entrance, her earlier confidence evaporating as she took in the sea of leather vests. Mike noticed her and raised his voice slightly. "Mrs. Worthington, glad you're here to witness this." The diner grew even quieter. "You thought Sarah should be punished for standing up for me," Mike continued. "You thought your status in this town meant you could demand special treatment at someone else's expense." Patricia's face flushed. "I never." "You did," Mike interrupted. "And you should know something about this town you think you have influence over." We look out for our own here. All of our own. From the elderly veteran you called riff-raff to the single mother you got fired because she wouldn't disrespect him to please you. A local news van pulled up outside. Someone had called them, and a reporter and cameraman made their way inside. Walter stepped forward, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. "Mike, please. Tell your friends we can talk about this." "That's all we want, Walter," Mike replied reasonably. "A conversation about Sarah's job." The news crew began filming as Walter glanced anxiously between the bikers, the camera, and his half-empty diner where only a few regular customers remained, watching the scene unfold with obvious interest. "Sarah was a valued employee," Walter began carefully. "Was?" Mike questioned, raising an eyebrow. Walter swallowed hard. "Is. Sarah is a valued employee. There may have been a misunderstanding earlier." The reporter moved closer, microphone extended. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here today?" Before Walter could answer, Mike spoke up. "I'm Michael Thornton, president of the Defenders Motorcycle Club and Vietnam veteran. This morning, this young lady," he gestured to Sarah, "was fired for defending me against discriminatory treatment. Now, we're just here peacefully supporting her, hoping the diner's management will reconsider their hasty decision." The camera panned to Sarah, who stood straight, her military bearing evident despite her civilian clothes. "And you are?" the reporter asked. "Sarah Miller. I worked here for 6 years until this morning." "And what exactly happened this morning, Miss Miller?" Sarah hesitated, then spoke clearly. "A customer demanded that Mr. Thornton be moved from his regular table because of his appearance as a biker. When I refused to comply with what I considered discriminatory treatment toward a veteran and longtime customer, I was given the choice to either comply or leave. I chose to leave." The camera turned to Walter, whose discomfort was palpable. "Mr. Davis." Walter Davis, manager of Daisy's Diner. "Mr. Davis, do you have a response to Miss Miller's account?" Walter looked around at the sea of bikers, the news camera, and the few regular customers watching intently. His eyes finally settled on Sarah. "Sarah has been one of our most dedicated employees for years," he began slowly. "This morning's incident was regrettable. In the heat of the moment, I made a poor decision. Sarah was right to stand up for our longtime customer, and I was wrong to put her in that position." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to publicly apologize to both Sarah and Mr. Thornton and offer Sarah her job back, effective immediately, with a raise." A cheer went up from the bikers. The camera panned back to Sarah. "Miss Miller, will you accept the offer?" Sarah looked at Mike, who gave her a subtle nod. "I would be happy to return to Daisy's Diner. This place and its customers have been like family to me." Rita stepped forward, handing an envelope to Sarah. "Before you put that apron back on, the clubs wanted to give you something." Sarah opened the envelope to find cash, a lot of it. "What's this?" she asked, stunned. "Just over $8,000, Rita explained. "Collected from all of us here, should cover your rent for a few months and those college application fees for your daughter." Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "I can't accept this." Mike placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. "You stood up when it cost you everything. Let us stand up for you now." The reporter, sensing a powerful story, asked, "Ms. Miller, you mentioned being a veteran yourself. Did your military service influence your decision to stand up for Mr. Thornton today?" Sarah nodded. "In the military, you learn that you don't leave anyone behind. You stand up for your brothers and sisters in uniform, during service and after. I couldn't call myself a veteran if I treated another veteran with anything less than the respect they've earned." The camera turned to Patricia Worthington, who had been trying to slip away unnoticed. "Ma'am, do you have any comment on today's events?" Patricia froze, then turned with a forced smile. "This has all been blown out of proportion. I simply requested a different table for my family. I had no intention of causing anyone to lose their job." A murmur ran through the crowd of bikers. Mike spoke up. "Mrs. Worthington, I think you owe Sarah an apology." The camera remained focused on Patricia as she glanced around, clearly calculating the public relations disaster unfolding for her business. "I may have overreacted this morning," she finally admitted, "and I regret that Sarah lost her job as a result. For that, I apologize." It wasn't the most heartfelt apology, but Sarah nodded acceptance. "Thank you, Mrs. Worthington." Walter, eager to resolve the situation, stepped forward with Sarah's apron. "Whenever you're ready, Sarah." Sarah took the apron and tied it on as another cheer rose from the bikers. Mike raised his hand for quiet. "Now that Sarah's job is restored, I think we're all feeling a bit hungry. Who's ready for lunch?" The diner erupted in approving shouts as bikers began examining menus. The remaining waitstaff looked simultaneously relieved and terrified at the prospect of serving 400 hungry bikers. Sarah leaned close to Mike. "I don't know how to thank you." Mike smiled. "Just keep standing up for what's right. That's all the thanks any of us need." 6 months later, Sarah wiped down the counter at Daisy's diner, smiling as she watched the usual Tuesday morning crowd. So much had changed since that day when 400 bikers had shown up to support her. The bell above the door jingled, and Mike walked in, followed by 5 other members of his club. They made their way to what was now officially known as the Defenders Corner. An expanded section with photos of local veterans on the wall and a permanent POMIA table set in honor of fallen service members. "Morning, Assistant Manager Miller?" Mike greeted with a grin. Sarah poured his coffee before he'd even sat down. "That's still weird to hear. How'd the Veterans Breakfast fundraiser go last weekend?" "Almost 15,000 raised for the VA hospital," Mike replied proudly. "Your daughter's bake sale contribution alone brought in over 500. Sarah beamed. "Emma's thrilled about that scholarship from your foundation. She never thought she'd be able to afford State University." The Veterans Breakfast had become a monthly tradition, with Sarah coordinating between the diner and various motorcycle clubs. Walter had recognized her organizational skills and promoted her 3 months after the incident, as it was now called in town lore. The door chimed again, and Patricia Worthington entered. Unlike 6 months ago, she didn't survey the room with disdain, but instead nodded respectfully to several patrons she now knew by name. "Morning, Patricia," Sarah greeted her. "The usual?" Patricia nodded. "Yes, please. And is that pamphlet about the VA volunteer program still available?" Sarah reached under the counter and handed her a brochure. "They're always looking for help with the reading program." After the video of the confrontation had gone viral, Patricia's real estate business had suffered. Rather than double down, she had surprised everyone by attending the next Veterans Breakfast with a genuine apology and a donation. Since then, she'd been slowly rebuilding her reputation in the community, not through her wealth or connections, but through honest service. As Sarah delivered breakfast to Mike's table, he patted her hand. "You know, if you just served that woman and kept quiet that day, none of this would have happened." Sarah looked around the thriving diner, now a popular spot for both locals and bikers passing through town. The wall of veterans photos, the community bulletin board advertising fundraisers and support groups, the framed news article about the day 400 bikers stood for justice that had brought tourists to Riverbrook. "I think everything happened exactly as it should have," she replied. Mike nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about standing up for what's right. You never know just how far those ripples will spread." As Sarah moved on to serve other customers, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the diner's window. The woman looking back at her stood taller, more confident than the Sarah of 6 months ago. She had discovered something that day. That one person with courage could make a real difference, and that doing the right thing, even at personal cost, could lead to unexpected blessings. Outside, a single motorcycle pulled up, followed by a family in an SUV. Inside, veterans sat alongside business people, farmers next to teachers, all sharing the same space with respect. In their own small way, the events in this diner had helped heal divisions and remind a community of its values. And it had all started with one simple, costly choice to stand up for what was right. Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to In the Heartlight for more inspiring tales of everyday heroes. And don't forget to check out the videos currently on your screen. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.